I'm number 311. If they had stopped at a reasonable number like 10, I wouldn't be here. So what am I going to talk about is how I got into rocket science, because I mentioned to Yvette that I was a rocket scientist at one point, and she was kind of impressed. And I use that term once in a while with people, and people seem to get it, to understand what it is, even though they don't understand, the science behind it. But so how do I hit next? Escape. So when I was a kid, my brother George had a little model airplane, one of the ones that goes in a circle, and I was like, I guess 5 or 6, and he says that I just sat on it and broke it. It's his first plane. And my mom had a love of aviation, and my dad, and I guess they had a plane in Cuba, and I'm trying to figure out what happened to me that I got this bug. So what happened, to make a long story short, is I was in Opus Dei, and they said, why don't you go to Boston? I'm like, okay. And then they said, well, why don't you apply to MIT? And I'm like, that's a good one. So I had been to Villanova undergrad in mechanical engineering, and I applied to MIT. And when you get the thick package from the school, so I got into MIT, and I'm like, oh, fudge. So this is MIT from the air, and this is the aero department. So I got accepted in mechanical engineering. I went and checked out the engineering department, mechanical, and it was pretty boring, like generators and stuff, not to offend any electricals or whatever. But then I walked over to the aero department, and they had pictures of satellites and airplanes and lasers, and I'm like, I want to transfer. But I hadn't started yet. So they said, yeah, why not? So I go to the aero department, and this is a little bit ahead of the game yet. And I get accepted as an RA at Draper Labs, which used to be the instrumentation laboratory. And next thing I know, my assignment for my thesis was to develop a constellation of satellites that would cover the Earth. And you know how now when you navigate with GPS, you have 33 satellites up there, maybe more, and you're getting a fix, a position from 4 satellites. You need 4 to do GPS. But they wanted me to do it with 3. And so I walked over to MIT to something like this, to this globe, and I'm like, just looking at it, and praying that something would come to mind. And I walked over to MIT from Draper a few times a week and just played with this big old chalkboard of a globe. You probably have never seen one of these. I hope you never do. But I was 23 years old, and I was in over my head, to put it mildly. But I was telling somebody earlier that this is my thesis here, which I brought. So I was telling somebody earlier that I had no idea what I was doing with half of the courses. Like my first course was lasers and optics, and I couldn't understand the questions. I mean, I'm sitting there in class, and the guy says, well, what about the diffraction across the, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh my word, I have no idea what he's saying. So, and then there was a couple of guys from, from Africa, Shagun Adebayo, who wasn't going to study for his math exam. And I'm like, dude, we need to study. And he's like, okay. He wasn't going to study for this exam at MIT. He already had a PhD from a Russian university, but he needed to get one from the States, thank God. So we studied, and I got through all the courses. I got all B's, straight B's, which is the lowest you can get if you want to stay in grad school. And then I almost didn't graduate because I was having trouble with a course, and I got a D+ in that one, but I graduated anyway. So I worked on ICBMs. ICBMs are rockets that are pretty deadly. ICBM stands for Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, and this is a Trident missile. Trident is a Navy missile, and the test launches were from the Cape from Cape Canaveral Kennedy Space Center. And I went to a test launch, and I'm telling you, it was pretty dramatic. And these rockets are 30 feet tall. And I got a chance to go up to one of these and to look at a 30-foot rocket. And then I went up the steps, and I was looking at the dummy warheads. And that was one of those moments. When I started doing that, so I'm a crier. You've heard Xavier cry, right? So I cry at commercials. Yeah, so this thing was 30 feet tall. I go up the stairs, and I'm looking at these dummy warheads, and I knew that I was in pretty deep, And at some moment, I decided I needed to get out of this game, but I put my time in. So, for those of you who are so inclined, you nerds, the equations of motion and information theory and so forth are applied to this cup called the Draper cup, and I actually made available. Come on. Next. Here we go. So for those of you who want to get a smattering of what some of the equations are, 1 minute. Jesus. Those are some of the equations. I've gotten into radio control airplanes, as most of you know, and this is my list. So radio control is a affordable version of aviation. The full-scale aviation, which is you get in the plane like what Brandon does, is very expensive unless somebody's paying for it, other than yourself. And so I'm tracking how I fly radio control, and the reason is that I read an article about 10,000 hours to become an expert. So I decided, let's put in the hours. The bad news is that I'm only at 468. So over here is the expert arrival date, and that's like 10/4/2042. Hey, wait, I'm done? Hey, one more quick one. This is my list of maneuvers, 100 maneuvers, and this is landing on an ice lake, and this is flying a drone, and that's it.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Mel. We really appreciate it, and it's hard to go first, especially with this kind of time constraint.